On July 10th, we unveil the all-new JG9 Studios, the coolest NFL office on YouTube where all future streams will take place. Video drops at 6 p.m. Eastern, and a celebratory live stream drops at 9 p.m. Eastern. And now, on with our feature presentation. Vince Lombardi, the Vince Lombardi years. Oh, what a glorious time to be a Green Bay Packers fan. In the 1960s, there was no team in all of football more dominant and more formidable than the Green Bay Packers. In an 8-year stretch from 1960 to 67, they made it to the NFL Championship 6 times, and were the champions of pro football 5 times, including the first 2 installments of the Super Bowl. After being the laughingstock of the NFL throughout the 1950s, the 1960s belonged to the Packers, in the same way that it belonged to the Beatles and the Boston Celtics. And a big part of that, obviously, was the coaching of Vince Lombardi, widely regarded as the greatest coach in the history of professional football. There is a reason his name is etched on the championship trophy, and will be until the end of time. So yeah, the Vince Lombardi era was a good time to be a Packers fan. Right after that? Oh no, oh god no. Because as soon as Lombardi left, his successor, Phil Bengtson, just about destroyed the team. The Packers were a shell of themselves after Lombardi retired from the game following the 1967 season. And even though Bengtson was a heck of a defensive coordinator under Lombardi, he was wildly unfit to actually lead a team. And caught in the middle of all of this was this man right here, the legendary quarterback Bart Starr. Because during the 1969 season, in a game against the defending NFL champion Baltimore Colts, Bengtson decided to do something absolutely stupid and absolutely insane with his star quarterback. Pun completely intended. And it caused a giant rift between he and the franchise man. If you ever need an exhibit of just how unfit Phil Bengtson was to be a head coach, this video should be all you need. Because this is the story behind what might just be, considering the circumstances, the stupidest moment that Bart Starr was ever involved in as a player. Before I talk about the actual game in question and the outrage that came afterwards, we need some context to understand the importance of this game, as well as what the status of Bart Starr was throughout the week. It's November 9th, 1969. It's week 8 of the NFL season, and as we're officially in the second half of the year, we have an absolutely big game on our hands over at Memorial Stadium between the Green Bay Packers and the Baltimore Colts, as in, the only NFL teams to represent the league in the Super Bowl thus far. To say that the stakes were high for this game for Green Bay would be putting it lightly, because this game had the potential to decide their entire season. On one hand, they were off to a very good start. They were sitting pretty with a 5-2 record, and were riding high on a 2-game winning streak after defeating the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Atlanta Falcons in back-to-back weeks. Granted, there was nothing too impressive about doing that in the late 1960s, but a win is a win nonetheless. However, on the other hand, they were in massive trouble, because in 1969, you had to win your division in order to make it to the playoffs. There were no wild cards, meaning that no matter how good Green Bay's record was, if it did not result in a first-place finish in the Central Division, they would miss the postseason. And if that seems unfair, just ask the 1967 Baltimore Colts, who missed the playoffs despite literally being undefeated going into their final game of the season. And with the Minnesota Vikings 1 game ahead of them at 6-1, the Packers needed to win this one to keep pace. The Packers and Vikings were meeting in the all-important Week 9 clash to potentially decide the division. But that game only has the meaning that it does if the Packers win this game in Week 8 against the Colts. Lose it, and the Vikings create some breathing room, and the Packers have quite the uphill climb to make it to the playoffs. Having said that, even though the Packers were in some trouble because of the strength of their division, it doesn't take away from the fact that over the first half of the season, they were an awfully good team. they were one of the best teams in the NFL. And a big reason for that was, without a doubt, the play of this man right here, the legendary Hall of Fame quarterback, Bart Starr. Obviously, Starr was a heck of a quarterback, and there's a reason why he has gone down as one of the greatest to ever do it. The less said about his coaching stint, the better. But if you do want to learn more about that chapter of his life, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Still, as a player, Starr was incredible, and was a big reason, alongside Lombardi, why the Packers were really able to turn things around in the 1960s. He made 4 Pro Bowls, led the league in completion percentage 3 times heading into the 1969 season, and was even named the MVP of the league in 1966, when he not only guided the Packers to their first Super Bowl ever, but had what was, at the time, the 4th highest passer rating in NFL history, as he posted a rating of 105, only surpassed by Milt Plum in 1960 with Cleveland, Sammy Baugh in 1945 with Washington, and Sid Luckman in 1943 with Chicago. I would be here all day if I listed every single accolade and every single historical accomplishment of Bart Starr's career. However, long story short, he was an awfully good quarterback, and was widely regarded as the greatest quarterback of the 1960s for a reason. And during the 1969 season, he was picking up right where he left off. Even though he was 35 years old, he was playing like he was 30 years old, because he looked as good as ever through the first half of the season. In Green Bay's first 7 games, he threw a touchdown pass in all of them, and had an insanely good touchdown-to-interception ratio of 9-4, or better than 2-1. Keep in mind that the league-wide average was somewhere in the 1-1 ballpark, so he was more than doubling that. There were 3 games where he finished with a passer rating above 138, or not even 20 points shy of a perfect passer rating. That is insane for any era, but for 1969, that's incredible. And through the first 7 games of the season, not only did he have 9 touchdown passes, but he was on pace to throw for 18, which would have been a career high, beating his mark of 16 from the 1965 championship season. He was the top-rated passer in the NFL, was completing over 63% of his passes, on pace to match his total from the 1968 season when he led the league in that category, and at a time when the league-wide average was around 52%, so more than 10 percentage points below, and a passer rating of 98.6, at a time when the league-wide average was barely above 71, so Starr was nearly 30 percentage points above the mean. Safe to say, Bart Starr was really good, and was putting together an MVP season at this rate, especially if the Packers could make the playoffs. However, it was not all sunshine and rainbows for Starr, because throughout all of this, Starr was playing in immense pain. It wasn't showing because he was looking as good as ever, but Starr was really struggling out there. He suffered a shoulder injury during Week 5 against the Los Angeles Rams in a 34-21 loss. The following week, against the Atlanta Falcons, he hurt his neck. And in the week leading up to the Steelers game in Week 7, he pulled his right bicep during practice. The only reason he played the Steelers game was because he came off the bench after Don Horn was wildly ineffective under center. So you had a starting quarterback with a bum shoulder, a bum neck, and a bum bicep on his throwing arm. All these body parts seem kind of important for a quarterback to have healthy, right? Starr's status for the all-important Week 8 battle against the Baltimore Colts was up in the air. Having said that, head coach Phil Bengtson was saying all the right things, depending on how you want to look at it, and was assuring everyone that Starr was okay, and that he was going to start this game. On Monday, November 4th, when someone asked Bengtson whether or not Starr was going to play against Baltimore, Bengtson didn't say, "That's up to the doctors," or "We're taking it day by day." He said, quite simply, "Yes." All right, that's oddly confident, but that's a really good sign. Never mind the fact that the Packers called up quarterback Billy Stevens from the practice squad, which is something that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to do if Starr could go, because teams didn't carry 3 quarterbacks on the active roster. Starr was going to play this game. 2 days later, on November 5th, all systems were still a go, as Bengtson said that Starr was his probable starting quarterback. Again, that's a pretty good sign. And Bengtson was nothing if not consistent throughout the week, as 2 days later, on November 7th, he assured everyone that Starr was starting this game, saying, "We're counting on him starting." Yes, Starr was in pain, but man, was he a warrior. He was not only going to play in this all-important game to potentially decide Green Bay's playoff fate, seeing as the difference in that division between 6-2 and 5-3 after 8 weeks was drastic, but he was going to start. Sore neck, sore bicep, sore shoulder, and all. So with that being said, let's take a look at Bart Starr's highlights from this game that he started. Roll the tape. What happened here? Where are my clips at? God, I knew this summer internship idea with getting an editor for the NFL channel was a bad idea. Okay, let's try that again. Let's look at Bart Starr's highlights from this game that he started. Roll the tape. Are we for real right now? Are we for real right now? Come on. Where are the highlights? Starr started the game. Either my editor is super lazy, or Bart Starr didn't throw a single pass in this game, and he got yanked for some inexplicable reason. But come on. What are the odds of that being the case, right? Oh my God, you've got to be kidding me. I know what you guys are thinking right now, as the Packers lost this game 14-6 without scoring a single touchdown and without scoring a single point past the first quarter to put a huge dent in their hopes of winning the NFL Central and making the playoffs. I know exactly what you're thinking, as you're watching highlights of this game without Bart Starr involved in a single one of them, good or bad. How does Bart Starr start the game, and yet, before ever throwing a pass, get pulled? Well, get ready for this absolutely insane logic, because I promise you, you're not going to believe it. It would be one thing if Starr went a drive to test himself out and then removed himself from the game when he realized he was in too much pain. That's a non-story. It'd be one thing if Starr didn't throw a pass because he was sacked and re-aggravated an injury that way. That's happened before, and that's a non-story. But nope. On the first drive of the game, all the Packers did was hand the ball off to their running backs. Then, Bengtson decided that he had seen enough of Starr, and without having him throw a single pass, decided to bench his starting quarterback in exchange for Don Horn. As for what Bengtson said about his strategy, we expected all week to be able to use Bart against the Colts. He came in and played the week before against the Steelers. We thought that, with time, his condition would improve. I'm sorry, what? You used Bart against the Colts too, but let me get this straight. You expected to use him all week against the Colts. You had him throwing in pregame warm-ups. You had him freaking start the game. You didn't see him grimacing in pain or feeling awful. And yet, without having him do literally anything, you pull him from the game? And it would be one thing, again, if Starr himself told Bengtson, "I'm not 100% today. I'm not feeling it." But nope, that wasn't the case at all. Said Starr about the entire fiasco, "Coach Bengtson wanted me to start the game, and I did. Then he took me out. It was his decision. He wanted him to start the game and throw no passes, because that makes perfect sense." And when he was asked about what the heck Bengtson was thinking, seeing as he was feeling fine and was ready to play, Starr said, "You'd have to ask him about that." So yeah, Starr was absolutely livid about this, and rightfully so. I don't get how you can communicate this poorly and bench your starting quarterback for not being healthy enough. Yet, he's healthy to start the game, and he didn't even do anything to exhibit that he was injured. It's almost like if you're auditioning for a singing competition and they have you sing Sweet Child of Mine, and they stop the audition after 30 seconds and say, yeah, you're not going through. You don't have the vocal chops. Meanwhile, the first 30 seconds of that song is an instrumental. It's a guitar solo. Granted, it's a great guitar solo, but it's a guitar solo nonetheless. You don't sing during that. You literally haven't even opened up your mouth. That's what this was like. Bart Starr started a game with the full expectation that he was going to play the entire way. And then, he got yanked before even throwing a pass. Even though his coach thought he was good enough to start, but not good enough to play after that. Which makes no sense. And even though Bart Starr himself had no say in this whatsoever. I give up. My head hurts. If that's not a dysfunctional mess, then I don't know what is. Bart Starr was a heck of a quarterback, as he started 157 games over his career with the Packers. This one in 1969 against the Colts, where he accumulated no highlights? Depending on how you want to look at it, it was either the most notable or the least notable start of his career, because he literally did not do anything. Nothing about this start made any sense. Nothing logically about any of this made any sense whatsoever, which pretty much sums up the Phil Bengtson era in Green Bay. Because on this day in 1969, Bart Starr, thanks to the idiocy of his head coach, was the furthest thing from a star. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.